If you hear somebody say the word Hindu or Hinduism, you're probably going to be thinking primarily about people from the country of India. And you would be correct. One of the differences between Hinduism and most of the other religions we study is that people who follow those other religions can be found in many parts of the earth. They're scattered all over the globe. But Hinduism, by and large, is contained in the country of India. If you meet Hindu people in other places, they probably have family in India, or maybe they themselves at one time had lived in India. Even though that's not true in every case, that would be true by and large, especially in comparison to other religions. And you may be familiar with one who is considered the most famous Hindu of the modern era. His name is Mahatma Gandhi. And there's a lot to be learned about Gandhi. You can find a lot of information online about him. He was a kind of a freedom fighter for the cause of the average, everyday Hindu. And he took a little bit looser view of some of the Hindu teachings than did those who would be called radical Hindus. In fact, eventually he was killed by radical Hindus because of some of the political positions that he took on behalf of the Hindu people. And we're not going to get into his life today, but you can find reading about him that's quite interesting. Now, what does the word Hindu actually mean? Well, it comes from a famous river in North India, and it's based on a Sanskrit term, Sindhu. Now, Sanskrit is one of the oldest languages that is known to man, and and it appears that that language was introduced into India by a particular group of people that we'll mention in just a moment. So if you look at the upper left portion of the map, you can see this river, which is the Indus River, and that appears to be the place where Hinduism was, let's say, originated, where the Hindu people originally settled. Okay, and not everybody agrees on that, but there is at least a good group of scholars who believe that people from actually the East, who were in many cases Arab people, came and settled in that region and formed the first civilization known today as the Indian culture. And then, at some point later on in history, a group of lighter skinned people who eventually came and settled that area forced the original settlers out, whether it happened through military activity or whether it was just the fact that they were larger and wealthier. We don't know for sure, but the original settlers then would have come back, been forced down to settle more in the south part of modern day India, and the lighter skinned people dominated the north and lived there. Again, there's a lot that you can do to study this on your own and come up with some of your own conclusions about how things took place in the land of India. Hinduism began as a collection of many religious traditions in South Asia. Actually, today we understand India as a collective nation of people, but that wasn't always the case. There were people who represented a variety of religious persuasions who lived, according to historians, peaceably side by side one another, although there's some question as just how peaceable they really were, how much they did actually get along with each other. But it wasn't until the British came in with the East India Company and a lot of British settlements began to, in a sense, unify the people, actually began calling them Hindus, even though they really resented that title, at least at first, because they represented a variety of religious ideas. But they had enough in common that eventually they did adopt that title Hindu. And today, India is commonly referred to as a Hindu nation. All right. And again, there's a lot of history there that is worth studying. Hinduism is one of the oldest religions in the world with over 800 million adherents. I mean, that's approaching a billion. There are a lot of, and remember that most of them are concentrated in the country of India itself. It is debated whether Western Orientalists or Hindu intellectuals created the term Hinduism. Exactly where it came from is hard to say. Uh, uh, in other words, was it people who lived among the people groups in India that developed this idea of everybody being called Hindus, or did it happen externally by those who were looking in and saying, well, you guys are all Hindus? So once again, we can't be totally sure, but now it's commonly understood by those in India and those on the outside that it is a Hindu nation. Now, there are lots of religions in India. Hinduism is one of them. Buddhism is there, at least in small quantities. Islam, I've been told by one Hindu man that as many as 25% of the population of India is Muslim. That's a high figure, and that may be exaggerated, but there is a great number. Christianity, in different forms, also constitutes a fairly large portion of the population of India. And so, not everybody is Hindu. And of course, there are those who would call themselves atheists or non-religious and are more politically oriented. You probably have heard of yoga. And if you have a workout app of some sort, you can probably find yogic exercises there to help with meditation and the development of stretching and things like that. It's a popular Western practice that's rooted in Hinduism, and it comes from the Sanskrit word for union. And the idea of yoga was to assume certain positions, physical postures that would enable you to connect yourself to the spiritual world. And you can even see some hints of animism coming through in a practice such as yoga. Most people in America who practice yoga do it purely for physical or health reasons, although there are some that actually do adopt the spiritual implications of yoga as it's presented in their teachings. Now, one of the main characteristics of the culture of India is the well-known caste system. And I want you to be sure to understand the difference between caste and class. Here in the United States, we talk about classes, lower class, middle class, upper class, and we use those designations primarily to refer to economic status. Lower class people are the poor, the upper class people are the rich, and then you have the majority middle class, if you will. But in India, that's not the idea behind the caste system. Okay, it's referred to as varna, which means color or class, but it doesn't refer primarily to economic status. It really refers to birth status. And you can see there that 4 major castes are identified in this chart: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and then those who are completely dissociated from the caste. They're not even considered a caste, are the Dalits, or the untouchables. They're people that assume the most degraded, if you will, tasks in society, at least as a Hindu would view those things. Now, how do you become a member of those castes? Is it an economic question? No, it's not. It's a question of birth. So you can be born into the highest caste, which is the Brahmin caste, even if you're a very poor person, because your parents were part of that caste. And you could be born into the Dalit group, which is not even in the caste system. In fact, you've probably heard the word outcast, and that's where that comes from. Outcasts are those who do not pertain to a caste. And the Hindus, of course, believe in reincarnation, and they believe that depending on how you lived the life that you're living now, when you come back in your next life, you'll either move up the caste system or down. And therefore, they would say that those who are the untouchables, the outcasts, the Dalits, are there because in previous lives they lived in an evil fashion or irresponsible way to some extent, so that they actually became untouchables. Um, and it's a very, very sad reality, but most Hindus today still believe in the idea of the caste system. Now, one thing that you should keep in mind is that there really are not just four caste classifications. Uh, some have estimated that there are as many as 20,000 different variations of castes. They would all fall into one of these four in a general sense, but they can be subdivided into the thousands. And so that's something to keep in mind. And even today, for the most part, those who are from one caste system would not be permitted or advised to marry someone who is from a higher or lower caste. And that's not true in every case, but it does. The idea still does exist. And you can see that the Brahmins claim to come from the head of a pre-existing kind of a god that they would recognize. And the Kshatriyas came from his upper body section. They were the rulers, the administrators, the warriors. The Vaishyas are the artisans, tradesmen, farmers, merchants. They coming from the area of the legs where the strength for work is identified, and so on. And so this is very, very important in understanding Hindu teaching, because some would say that the only way that you could actually reach, the ultimate state of paradise is by working your way up to becoming a Brahmin and then passing from there. But there's a lot of variation in the way that this is viewed. Okay. When it comes to the scriptures in the Hindu system, there is a collection called the Vedas, Veda, which is a word that means knowledge. And there are many, many ancient Veda scriptures existing today. Some are more well known than others. The most famous of all of the Hindu scriptures is the one called the Rig Veda. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read this. This is Sanskrit. I just want to make a couple of observations about it. If you look carefully, you can see that there is a certain almost line going across the top of the letters. And the impression that it gives is that this was a hanging language. The line would be at the top, and then the letters would hang from the line going across. That's the opposite of English. In English, we write on the top of a line in order to say what we want to say. The Hebrew language, our Old Testament, where Old Testament is written, is a lot like the Sanskrit language in that it is also a hanging language where the text comes below the line. And again, as I said, Sanskrit is one of the most ancient of all the languages, and it is the language of the Rig Veda. And the Sanskrit language is said to have come to India along with the lighter-skinned people that I mentioned earlier, who came in and kind of flushed out the darker-skinned Mideast people who had arrived there first. And so the lighter-skinned people brought the Sanskrit language with them, and they became the priests and became essentially part of the Brahma caste. And so the Vedas, the ancient scriptures of Hinduism, were written in their language, the Sanskrit language. All right, as I mentioned earlier, there's so much more to say about it because it's such an ancient language and has become very diverse. But we'll say a little bit more about it in the next lecture, and then have to leave you on your own to dig deeper if you so desire.